Students come to me all the time saying, I sound like a screeching owl, or I just can't quite seem to keep my bow straight. But then there are also position issues that many students are not as aware of because they're a lot more subtle. Some of those, especially tension-related problems, can cause enormous problems for you in the long run. So that's why position is so important on the violin. In seasons of life where I was playing for easily 8 hours a day between practicing, rehearsals, and evening concerts, I never got tendonitis or nerve pain or any sort of neck or back pain that didn't go away with a few minutes of rest, ready to play for as many hours the next day. So this is what I want for you too. Great sound on the violin and reducing tension, which allows you to enjoy playing this beautiful instrument, hopefully throughout your whole life. I've written down the most common position problems that I see students have, and I put them into a checklist. So this is the perfect position checklist. You can download it for free through the link in the description below. And I have to say, it's really the resource that I wish every violinist had from day one of picking up this instrument. You can put this on your music stand and have it next to you as you play, and just remember to keep thinking about these things to help improve your playing, whether you're a brand new beginner or more advanced. So we're going to start on this page all the way down here, building our really great violin position, starting with our feet. A position of really good balance is actually going to help you achieve focused sound, much like it's the same for a singer standing up tall and achieving focused sound, or martial arts, actually. How do they chop those blocks with their bare hands? Well, they do it by focusing all the energy in their body into a narrow point. So to stand with good position, I want you first to put your feet together. So you're going to put your feet together much the way you would take a bow at the end of a performance. And then I want you to make a V with your feet, and you're going to take just a small, not a huge step, just a small step forward with your left foot. What I see a lot of students do is put their right foot forward and then kind of sit back on their hip like this. Not only does that not give you good balance, but that also doesn't focus the energy, right? So if you think of the violin, again, kind of like that martial arts analogy, if you think of the violin as an extension of your arm and focusing that energy, it makes sense for the left foot supporting the violin to be the one that's forward as you focus your energy through the violin, out the F holes, and to the audience. So let's switch now to our front view. And I want to talk about this one right here, which is about standing tall with your back and neck in a neutral position and not hunching over. So fun fact here, Jascha Heifetz, of course, is one of the most famous violinists, and he had absolutely incredible sound, right? But he had the habit of hunching forward a little bit as he played, and his x-rays later in life showed that his spine had actually become misaligned and more hunched in an irreversible way over time, and he actually had quite significant back pain. Now, he used to joke that that was an occupational hazard, but of course there are also many incredible violinists who don't suffer from that unfortunate back pain later in life, and it's because Heifetz played with his back in unfortunately kind of a suboptimal position, but you don't have to experience that. You can stand really straight and tall with your shoulders back and down and no tension in those shoulders. And when you stand up straight this way, it's important to make sure that your violin comes to you rather than you coming to your violin and hunching over your instrument like this. So a good exercise to practice this is to start without your violin, practice that standing up tall that we just talked about, and then when you pick your violin up, hold it in front of you for a second like this, so that you just are separating the violin from that straight position. And then carefully put your violin up, making sure that the violin comes to you rather than you coming to your violin like this. You can also double check that this is actually working for you by testing if you can drop your violin arm without your violin moving at all or feeling like it's going to fall down in any way. If this isn't working for you and your violin's constantly sliding down or something like that, I really encourage you to take a closer look at your shoulder bar. Now, I know that some violinists don't play with a shoulder bar, but unless you have an especially short neck, I highly recommend using something like this. Coon bars are really popular. I happen to really like the Wolf Forte Primo, and you can experiment with different kinds of shoulder rests. But the important thing is that it helps you achieve good balance with the violin without lifting this shoulder to hold the violin in place. So you might have to really experiment with the feet. Most feet are adjustable, so in some cases you can move the shoulder bar to be longer or shorter depending on how it fits on the violin. And you can also, in almost all cases, extend the feet so that the shoulder bar becomes longer or shorter. For me, I like this part that comes up here to be a lot shorter than this one down here. So this one I extend almost all the way, and this one I shorten almost all the way. And I find that that just gives me really good support since I do have a longer neck. Now, when you put the shoulder bar on, and at this point we're down here in the shoulder bar section, you want to make sure that your shoulder bar is at this descending angle like this. Sometimes I see beginners put on their shoulder bars like this, where it's straight across, but that's unlikely to give you the support because you want it to sit on your collarbone and to be pretty high up here and then come this way to support your shoulder. I watched this amazing documentary about Isaac Stern, who goes to China many, many years ago to give a series of master classes. And in one of those master classes, he actually talks about shoulder bars. Now, he didn't use a shoulder bar. It looked like he didn't use anything at all. And he had a shorter neck and a stockier frame, so you would think maybe he just didn't need it. But then in one of those master classes, he actually opens his collar a little bit and says, "I have a secret." And he shows that he had this sponge that he would actually tuck under his shirt, and that would give him the support he needed. So again, experiment with different types of things. Maybe a sponge works better than a shoulder bar for you, but most violinists will need some kind of support to make sure that you don't resort to tension to hold up your violin. Okay, let's come down here and talk about the chin rest for a second. So this is something that I especially see with brand new beginners. You would think that you might put your violin up here straight in front of you like this and put your chin on the chin rest because it's called a chin rest. But the name is kind of a misnomer. So what you're actually going to do is line up the center of your jaw with the center of the chin rest, and that, like this, is going to be how you put the violin up under your chin. Sometimes I get asked, what about a center chin rest? I don't really recommend them. I think it's instructive that not all, but most really top professional violinists don't use a center chin rest. If you look at all the great soloists, most of them are not doing that. I think it's because it encourages you to kind of play with your violin more in front of you like this, and it would be more difficult to reach these really high notes on the G string. So for that reason, I don't really recommend it. I don't see it all that often, but you'll see what's best for your body. So if I turn this way, you'll see that the violin is actually quite high up on my shoulder, not in front of me like this. Okay, moving on, we're now here. This is the checklist item about making sure that your shoulders are down and relaxed. So we talked about shoulder tension here and how having a good supportive shoulder bar can help with that. But what about shoulder tension with this shoulder? So here's one thing I see a lot. I have a number of students who, when they play an up bow, start lifting their shoulder as they come toward the frog. And most of them don't actually realize that they're doing it. And then some students, when their bow is on the G string, just because it's farther away, as they lift their elbow to get there, they might also lift their shoulder a little bit. Okay, I am totally finishing this video at a later time, as you can see. But there are just a couple more checklist items I want to make sure we go over. When you're playing your violin, try to remember to always have your fingers hovering over the fingerboard. A lot of students get into the habit of curling their fingers backwards, the ones that they're not using. So maybe you play with your one and the rest of them are back here, or you play with all three of your fingers, but your pinky finger is still curled back here, or sometimes I see people even put it underneath the instrument. But that's not going to serve you well. This is something that I totally did too for a long time, and it was difficult to get out of that habit of having my fingers curled back. My pinky finger had to come from all the way back here, all the way to the fingerboard to play. And when you're playing something really fast, you just don't have time for that. So instead, from the very beginning, try to get into the habit of always having your fingers hovering over the fingerboard, even the ones you're not using. Watch the placement of your elbow. Now you might think, because we've talked so much about neutral position and not having any tension, that you would want your elbow to just be pointed straight down toward the floor, but that's not true. Actually, you want your elbow to be curved inward closer to the center of your body. And the reason for that is if your elbow is down, or especially if it's out facing the other direction, which is a common beginner mistake, you are going to have a difficult time reaching all of the notes on the lower strings, and especially coming up to those higher positions. So instead, pull your elbow under, closer to the center of your body, and you will have a much easier time reaching all the notes. And lastly, this is a common beginner mistake that I see among many of my students, and that's doing this kind of funny wrist turn where they're making almost an L shape with their wrist. And I think the reason this happens is that when you're just getting started on violin and you're kind of like maybe doing this thing where your head is this way and you're trying to reach for the notes, it can be tempting to first collapse your wrist in, which you know we don't want to do, but also to have your wrist come this way as you're kind of looking for those notes. The problem with that is not only does it cause some tension in the wrist, but also you're going to have a really difficult time reaching your fourth finger and really reaching any notes that are on a lower string. So instead, although your elbow is curved under, your arm is still completely in this straight neutral position. Think of your arm as being straight like a tabletop. That's what my teacher growing up used to say. Everything is straight like a tabletop. So your wrist isn't pointing like this, and you're not doing, funny things like this. Your wrist isn't this way or that way. Everything is neutral and straight here, and your elbow is turned in. Okay, so at least for now, those are all of the checklist items that pertain to holding your violin correctly. Let me know in the comments if this helped you. Was there something that was surprising, or did you suddenly realize how to correct a bad habit that was holding you back from playing violin the way you wanted to? And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to share those too. If you're brand new to playing the violin, you might want to check out my 10-part beginner series. It's called How to Play Violin for Complete Beginners, and it goes through these checklist items, but kind of more in order, building your good position and your good bow step by step, and culminating in your very first piece on the violin. So feel free to check that out, and until next time, I hope this video has helped you share something beautiful with your music.